All right. Do we have sound on Facebook? Excellent. All right. Um, phones keep buzzing, so anyway. So it's a few minutes past 7, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank those folks that are watching by way of Facebook. We greatly appreciate you all taking the time out of your day to join us. Also, to the folks on Pal Talk there, again, we greatly appreciate you all for joining us as well and taking time out of your life to join us as we continue on the study in the book of Matthew. And we're up to Matthew chapter 5. And just to kind of give you an idea, an overview of where we've been so far, of course, Matthew chapter 1 starts off with the genealogy of Jesus Christ, and we find out that he is the son of David and the son of Abraham. And we've mentioned the fact that there's a distinct reason why we're told in the genealogy that he's the son of David, and then we're told that he's the son of Abraham. And that's because the first part of the book of Matthew is presenting Jesus Christ as king, and then the second part of the book of Matthew is dealing with Jesus Christ as man going to the cross. And it's really interesting as we go down through these passages and these chapters that we keep those things in mind, just in the back of our minds, so we can move forward with that. One of the other things we talked about is the whole issue with the book of Matthew is what? There is a kingdom that is coming, that Jesus Christ is going to establish a literal, visible, physical, earthly Davidic kingdom here on this earth. And that's one of the reasons why we see that we're told that he is a son of David. And then the fact that he is the son of Abraham gives him the right to the land which the kingdom's going to be established upon. So that's the main issue that we find out in chapter 1. And then we find out that he's going to be born. So we look at the genealogy as we go down through there, and we find out that he's going to be born. And then we get to the point in chapter 2 where he is, and the king doesn't like it because the king knows that there's going to be a king. And he asks for the wise men to go and find where this king is. And he says that he wants to worship him, but we all know the real reason why he was trying to find out where Jesus Christ was. And the whole issue there is he was trying to find out where he was so he could kill him, and to not allow him to take ownership of the kingdom at that particular time. And of course we understand how things worked out. Jesus Christ was able to make it through based upon some things that God worked through in those situations, and got everything taken care of. And we find out that in chapter 3, John the Baptist shows up as the forerunner for Jesus Christ and presents him. And when Jesus Christ actually comes and he says, "I'm here to be baptized of you," John the Baptist says, "No, I should be baptized of thee." And Jesus Christ says, "Well, we need to fulfill all righteousness." And so that's exactly what takes place. And then, of course, we've got the Spirit as like a dove descending down upon Jesus Christ. And then you got God the Father saying, "This is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased." And at that time you have the Godhead, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit together at that particular time during that earthly ministry. And then we get over into chapter 4 and we see Jesus Christ shortly after this declaration that he is the Son of God, in whom God is well pleased, that he goes up into the wilderness and he's tempted of the devil. And we talked about how what Satan's whole purpose there was to try to get Jesus Christ to do things that Jesus Christ was going to do sometime later on. He tried to get him to do them at the wrong time, right? And that's one of those things that we looked at. And we saw how Satan obviously misused, misquoted verses, just like he always has all the way back in the very beginning in Genesis. And then we get down through and we find out that from that time, after Jesus Christ comes down from the wilderness and he goes up into Galilee to start his earthly ministry, from that time forth he began to preach that the kingdom of heaven is at hand, which is the same message that John the Baptist was preaching. Now, when we get down to chapter 5, that's where we are now, and we started taking a look at some of the issues there. You notice in Matthew chapter 5, verse 1, it says, "And seeing the multitudes, he went up into a mountain, and when he was set, his disciples came unto him." And of course, we talked about in Scriptures, specifically prophetic Scriptures, but throughout the Scriptures, usually when we see a mountain, that's a reference to a kingdom. And so really what you have here is Jesus Christ goes up into a mountain and sits down, as if he's sitting down on the throne in his kingdom, and he's going to talk about the kingdom lifestyle, what that lifestyle is going to look like, and what it's going to be like. And that's where we find ourselves right now in Matthew chapter 5. So that's a real quick overview to get us up to speed through all the things that we've taught so far. And I don't know how many lessons that we had as we've come up to this point, but apparently we could have done them all in six minutes. But that's where we find ourselves here in Matthew chapter 5. And we're gonna read a couple verses through here, and then we'll get started. So Matthew chapter 5, we're going to start off in verse 1, and we'll read down through verse 7. So Matthew chapter 5, verse 1, "And seeing the multitudes, he went up into a mountain, and when he was set, his disciples came unto him, and he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy." Father, we thank you for the opportunity that we have to study your word, that you've preserved it throughout the years and ages, that we can have it and handle it, that we can read it, that we can study it, and we can apply it, and understand the issues that are going on here in Matthew chapter 5, that we know exactly where they're supposed to be located. We know who that he's talking to and what he's doing to prepare those folks as he was preaching at this particular time, that we can come to a greater knowledge and understanding and appreciation for your word, rightly divided. And it's in Christ's name we pray. Amen. So, as we take a look at this, we've already looked at blessed. First of all, that term blessed, we've gone through and we've dealt with this before. It has to do with being happy and joy, right? And it's a happiness and a joy that comes from a real place. It's not some fabricated happiness or some fabricated joy that, fake it till you make it type stuff. This is a true happiness and joy that comes from these issues that we see here. The very first thing that we notice here, he says, verse 3, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." And we talked about what is that poor. It's not that they're poor because they're poor in their circumstances or anything, but what it has to do with is humility and humbleness, right? Not pride. It's the exact opposite of pride. So when he's talking about these folks here, he's talking about that this kingdom will be built upon what? Humbleness, humility. As he says here, poor in spirit. Why? For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. That's and we've talked about this before. This has to do with the life, and it's really fascinating because it's not just the life that's going to be in the kingdom, but it's just going to be second nature to them. It's just going to happen, right? And we all know, hopefully, Jeremiah 31:31, where we go back and we find out that there's this new covenant that God's going to make with the house of Judah and with the house of Israel. And he's going to write his law in their inner parts, and he's going to give them a new heart, right? And we don't have time to go through all that, but that's something hopefully we can go back and take a look at, that new covenant that will take place one day. And what they're going to do is it's just going to be spontaneous. The life that they're going to have is just going to be spontaneous. And as you go down through there, that's the issue that we see here. In verse 4, he says, "Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted." And we talked about that mourn, right? It's not somebody that's at a funeral and they're mourning the loss of a loved one. No, it has to do more with a specific type of mourning when the folks who followed Jesus Christ and saw him be crucified, and they see the one whom they pierced, and they see him coming back, they're going to mourn, because they know that their Redeemer is coming back. And then you've also got a different group of people, we looked at those, that they're going to mourn because Christ is coming back, and then they're going to have judgment. All right? So you got a couple different mournings. Which one of those two do you think are going to find comfort? The ones that are waiting for their Messiah to show up again. And that's the ones that we find out that's what we're dealing with here. And so that's the ones that mourn when they see their Savior. When they see their Messiah coming, they're going to be mourning. And you got to think, he is preparing the little flock here to go through the tribulation period. And, you know, you stop and you talk about, you go back and take a look at things that you've ever gone through. When you get to the end of it and you know that it's no longer going to take place, you feel pretty good about it and you're comforted. And so that's the type of thing that they're going to be dealing with. They're mourning that their Savior is no longer here, that he is off in exile. But one day he's going to return, and they that mourn for him will be comforted. And then we looked at verse 5, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. And we talked about meekness wasn't weakness, right? And it's not just, you know, roll over me and do whatever you want to type thing. But it's more about peace under pressure, right? Having the proper mindset to be able to deal with situations. And you've got to think, as he's preparing these people to go through that tribulation period, they're going to have to deal with things, and they're going to have peace within to go through those situations. And so again, it's a specific poor in spirit, and it's a specific mourning, and it's a specific meeking, or a meekness, right? I don't know why I made that an adjective, but I did. Meeking, apparently. But that's one of those issues that we need to make sure that we keep in mind. There's specific type things, right? So then when we come here to verse 6, and he says, blessed are they, happy are they which do hunger after hunger and thirst after righteousness. Happy are they, and I don't want to change the word there, but that's the issue, right? They're happy about it. Why? They shall be filled. So it says here, blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness. So let's go take a look at some verses here real quick. Go back to Zephaniah chapter 2. All right, Zephaniah chapter 2. And let's go ahead and get Isaiah 26. All right, so we've got Isaiah chapter 26 and Zephaniah chapter 2. Zephaniah chapter 2 and Isaiah chapter 26. And let's take a look at a couple verses here. Zephaniah chapter 2, verse 1. Notice, gather yourselves together, yea, gather together, O nation not desired. Before the decree bring forth, before the day pass as the chaff, before the fierce anger of the Lord come upon you, before the day of the Lord's anger come upon you, seek ye the Lord, all ye meek of the earth, which have wrought his judgment. Seek righteousness, seek meekness. It may be ye shall be hid in the day of the Lord's anger. So we've talked about this before. What do we know about that little flock? Often, over and over again, we find out that little flock is a no nation, right? It's a no people. It's a foolish nation, as the nation of Israel would have called them. And it was that group of people. Go, hold your place there. Go real quick to Matthew or Romans chapter 10 or Romans chapter 9. And no, that's right. Romans chapter 10. When you go to Romans chapter 10, there's something that we see here. And you notice there in Zephaniah chapter 2, verse 1, he says, gather yourselves together, yea, gather together, O nation not desired. So you notice here in Romans chapter 10, one of the things that we know is there is you can go back into Deuteronomy and study this out, and you can find out that there is a nation, singular, that is going to do something for the whole nation of Israel. And what we find out is that little nation that he's talking about is going to be that little flock. You remember when Jesus Christ says to the religious leaders there, he says, I'm going to take the kingdom. In fact, I've taken the kingdom from you, and I'm going to give it unto the little flock. Right? A no people. And you notice here, in fact, he tells them, he says what? Fear not, little flock, for it's your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Well, notice here in Romans chapter 10, verse 18. Notice, he says, but I say, have they not heard? And the answer, of course, there is yes. And you go back in the context here and you find out he's talking about the nation of Israel. Did they not hear? Did they not have an opportunity to hear about what God's Word actually says? Did they not hear about the fact that they have a Messiah that's going to come and he's going to be born at this particular place? The answer is yes. Did they hear that this Messiah was going to grow up, that he was going to perform certain types of miracles, that he was going to do particular types of things, that he's going to go to a cross and die? Well, they didn't know about the cross, but they knew that he was going to die. And they knew these things. And that's the issue as we go down through here. He says, but I say, have they not heard? The answer is yes. Verily their sound went into all the earth, and their words unto the end of the world. But I say, did not Israel know? That's a really good question. Did they not know? Did not Israel know? The answer to that question again is yes. In fact, notice, first Moses saith, I will provoke you to jealousy by them that are no people. Right? We've gone back and we took a look in Matthew chapter 4 when Jesus Christ goes into Galilee, right? And in fact, you go there and he talks about Galilee of the nations. And so you've got these people up in Galilee who are so outside of the nation of Israel that the nation of Israel calls them a no people, a foolish people. And that's exactly where Jesus Christ starts to gather his disciples and gets some folks. And here's why. This is the reason why. And you go back to Deuteronomy, you find this out. He says, I will provoke you to jealousy by them that are no people. People that you look at and say, well, they're not worth my time of day to talk to. Now, you could stop there and say, you look at how our world is today, and everybody's, certain group of people, well, you're racist against these people, and you're racist against these people, whatever it is. I mean, they had it right there. They were saying, you all are those Galilean people, and you're not worth anything. You're a no people. And that's exactly who Jesus Christ goes to. Notice, he's going to use them to provoke the nation of Israel, the whole nation of Israel. Notice, I will provoke you to jealousy by them that are no people, and by a foolish nation I will anger you. A group of people who you don't think you should give the time of day to, he says, I'm going to provoke you to jealousy by them. And notice, it's a foolish nation, singular. Well, that's exactly who we're dealing with back here in Zephaniah chapter 2, verse 1. Where he says, gather yourselves together, yea, gather together, O nation, not desired. That's who that he's dealing with. So when you look at the people, and you see it all throughout Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, when the religious leaders are involved, take a look at the people who they always put down. That's a picture. That's a picture, if you will, of the nation of Israel against the little flock. And we see it in Matthew chapter 6, and we'll go through that as we get there. But notice, Zephaniah chapter 2, verse 1, that's who he's dealing with, is that nation. And notice what he says in verse 3. He says, seek ye the Lord, all ye meek of the earth. Well, isn't that the same group of people that we just got through reading about in Matthew chapter 5? And the answer is yes. Notice, which have wrought his judgment. Notice, seek righteousness. Isn't that the same thing that we just read in Matthew chapter 5, verse 6? Blessed are they who what? Hunger and thirst after righteousness. And it's so much more than just seeking. We'll see that as we go through. But what's he say? They seek righteousness, seek meekness. It may be ye shall be hid in the day of the Lord's anger. Which, by the way, they do. And you think about those things because isn't that, I mean, when you look at Matthew chapter 5, verse 6, what's going to happen when they seek after and they hunger and they thirst after righteousness is what? They're going to be filled. Real quick, Isaiah chapter 26. Isaiah chapter 26. Notice we'll start off in verse 1. In that day shall this song be sung in the land of Judah. We have a strong city. Salvation will God appoint for walls and bulwarks. Open ye the gates that the righteous, notice, nation, singular, which keepeth the truth may enter in. So when we talk about this nation, we're not done here yet, but there's an issue that we see here, that there is a nation. And notice, he says, open ye the gates that. Here's the purpose that I want you to open the gates, is that the righteous nation, which keepeth the truth, may enter in. So what do we find out about that nation? He says what? Blessed are they who hunger and thirst after righteousness. Why? They will be filled. So when you read here, and he says, open ye the gates, that the righteous nation which keepeth the truth may enter in. Do you know what they get? They get filled with that righteousness. That's a promise that he gives them. Notice, thou wilt keep him in perfect peace. By the way, think about what they're going to be going through during that tribulation period is a time of not peace. A time of great unrest, if you will. And what's he say? Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, because he trusteth in thee. Do you know what they're going to be able to do in that day? They're going to be able to have perfect peace. They go through that tribulation period. Jesus Christ talks about those that endure until the end, right? And they're going to have to endure all the way through the tribulation period until the end. And what's going to happen is they're going to open up the gates and let that righteous nation come through. And what's going to happen is they're going to have perfect peace. They're going to have perfect peace. Now, here's what's interesting. Hold your place there. Go back over to Romans chapter 5. Now, I know what people do with Isaiah 26:3, and they'll say, if you just keep your mind and your thoughts on God, then you're going to have perfect peace. Well, he says that in that day, that's that kingdom, right? In that day, when the kingdom is set up, which is after the tribulation period, then they're going to have that perfect peace. That's different than what we have today. Notice in Romans chapter 5, verse 1. Therefore, being justified, by the way, hold your place back there in Isaiah 26. Therefore, being justified by faith, we have peace with God. It's something that we own as a personal, private possession of our own. That is something that we have automatically because we're justified by faith. It's not something that we have to try to attain to or endure through. And hopefully, that day, one day during the kingdom, we already have that now. That is a promise that we have, that God says we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. Now, you take a look at that and you look over here in Isaiah chapter 26. In that day, they'll have perfect peace. Now, you stop and you think for a minute. During the time that the little flock was being created and built up, they were persecuted a lot. They didn't have peace. You take a look at the people that were with them. They never had peace. They went through struggles and problems and just issues because they followed Christ. And what's Christ tell them? it's don't worry about them hating you. They hated me first. So don't be shocked when they hate you. But there will come a time in that day that what? Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, because he trusted in thee. And notice, here's what's interesting. He says in verse 3, thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, because he what? Trusted, past tense, in thee. So when you take a look at this, what he's talking about is there's a group of people that's going to trust the Father. They're going to trust God. They're going to trust all the way through that tribulation period. And on the end of it, what's he going to do? Give them perfect peace. Why? Because their mind is stayed on him, and because they trusted him. It's a past tense thing. So what he's saying is on the other side of that tribulation period, they're going to have perfect peace. That's something that you and I have right now today as a personal present possession. Keep on going, verse 4. Trust ye in the Lord forever, for in the Lord Jehovah is everlasting strength. Now, you stop and you think about that real quick. And I'm looking at this list and looking at that clock. We might have to be on here for a little while. But here's the thing. Notice, what's he say? Trust ye in the Lord forever, for in the Lord Jehovah is everlasting strength. When you think about them going through the tribulation period, he is everlasting strength. That's what got them through. Why? Because they trusted in him. Because their mind is stayed on him. And what's going to happen is they're going to get that perfect peace. Why? Because he is their everlasting strength. Notice, for he bringeth down them that dwell on high, the lofty city, he layeth it low. He layeth it low ever to the ground. He bringeth it to even to the dust. The foot shall tread it down, even the feet of the poor and the steps of the needy. Notice, the way of the just is uprightness. Thou most upright dost weigh the path of the just. Yea, and in the way of thy judgments, O Lord, have we waited for thee. The desire of our soul is to thy name and to the remembrance of thee. Now notice, what I want you to notice there is what? In Matthew chapter 5, he says what? Blessed are they who what? Hunger and thirst after righteousness. This isn't just, well, we're gonna go here and try to. No, notice what he says here. This is what it means to hunger and thirst. Right here. Verse 8, he says, yea, in all the way in the way of thy judgments, O Lord, have we waited for thee. Why? The desire of our soul is to thy name and to the remembrance of thee. Notice, it's the desire of their soul. They didn't just say, well, we like all this stuff, so we want to be a part of it. No, it's a desire of their soul. They're hungering and thirsting after righteousness. And what's their promise? If they do that, is what? They're going to be happy. Why? They're going to be blessed. Why? Because they shall be filled. Continue on. Notice in verse 9, he says, with my soul have I desired thee in the night. Yea, with my spirit within me, I seek thee early. And when thy judgments are in the earth, the inhabitants of the world will learn righteousness. Now you stop and you think about that real quick. And again, this is all stuff that's going to be taking place in that day, right? And what's fascinating there is you look at that. You've got the soul in verse 9 and the spirit in verse 9. Now, we know that man is body, soul, and spirit. Or body, spirit, and soul, as Genesis puts it. And as Paul puts it, is what? Spirit, soul, and body. So we know that. We know that those three things are different. In fact, right here's a verse that will tell you at least the soul and the spirit are different. I mean, you go over to Hebrews and you find out what? that the Word of God is quick and powerful and sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even to dividing asunder of what? Soul and spirit. They're two different things. And so then we see the same thing here. What? With my soul have I, notice that word, desired thee in the night. Now, you go and you take a look at the night. We took a look years ago at the fourth watch, right? The 4 watches. You've got 4 watches, and we took a look at that darkness. And what that darkness there is what? That night there is what? It's that tribulation period. And notice what he says here. With my soul have I desired thee in the night. As they were going through that, what did their soul do? Did it look out in the circumstances and think, man, you know, I'm kind of hungry. I need to go get this mark of the beast so I can get some food. No. They trusted in the Lord. They know that God's going to take them in the middle of that tribulation period, and He's going to take them out in the middle of the mountains and feed them and take care of them. And what happens? They said, with my soul have I desired thee in the night. And yea, with my spirit within me will I seek thee early. For when thy judgments are in the earth, the inhabitants of the world will learn righteousness. Now, you stop and you think about that real quick. This world doesn't know what righteousness is. Notice here, for when thy judgments are in the earth, the inhabitants of the world will learn righteousness. You realize there's coming a day that no matter who's president in any country, there's coming a day when Jesus Christ is going to rule and reign from Jerusalem in that kingdom. And what's going to happen is what? They will learn righteousness. So don't seek for righteousness among unrighteous people. Don't look for perfection in unperfect people. One of these days, this world will learn righteousness. And by the way, that's in that day. They're going to learn righteousness. Notice, let favor be shewed to the wicked, yet will he not learn righteousness. In the land of uprightness will he deal unjustly, and will not behold the majesty of the Lord. And you go on down through there, and he's talking about that millennial kingdom. There's some things that's going to take place during that millennial kingdom that we don't have time for. But what's the issue there? What is it that, remember, Jesus Christ is preparing the little flock for what? The tribulation period. On the other side of the tribulation period is that 1,000-year reign where He's going to rule and reign in that throne in the mountain in that kingdom. All right? So what He's doing is He's sitting there in the mountain on His throne, basically, metaphorically, if you will, and He's telling the disciples and all those around Him, this will be real one day. And you're going to be happy that you, what? Hungered and thirsted after righteousness. And we see that's what's going on. So what is it to hunger and thirst after righteousness means what? They were actively, desperately seeking. Notice, that's what he says there, right? The desire of our soul. Right? He says, within my soul have I desired, and my spirit within me will I seek thee. That's what it means to seek, to hunger, and to thirst after righteousness. It's almost. Have you ever been part of Black Friday events? Back in the day, they used to be called Hot Friday when I worked at Radio Shack, and it's kind of odd. Most people that had to work them, they called them Black Friday. Called it Black Friday because it was it was a dark day. You want to see people at their worst, that was a place to go see it. And to see when people come in and they're just scrounging around looking for that deal. I've got to get this toy, and they just are desperately seeking that toy because they've got to make Susie so-and-so and Johnny very happy. That's the idea of hungering and thirsting after righteousness. What they have is they are seeking and they are hungering and thirsting. They're actively and desperately looking for it. They're seeking with all their heart. And you see that's what they're talking about there. The desire of their soul. And what they're doing is they're scrounging around for that righteousness. And that righteousness is the lifestyle of the kingdom. Now, think about this. In Matthew 5, he says what? Blessed are they who hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Now, hold your thought there. Go back to go over to Romans chapter 3, because this is interesting. Notice, Jesus Christ tells the little flock at that particular time, the group of people that was around him, he tells them at that time, blessed are they who what? Hunger and thirst after righteousness, because they will be filled. It's something that you will get one day. And we read in Isaiah 26, it's what? In that day, during the kingdom. But notice, that's in stark contrast to what we see here in Romans chapter 3. Notice, Romans chapter 3, verse 21. Paul has been dealing in Romans chapter 1, starting off in verse 16, talking about the gospel of Christ, that is the power of God unto salvation. And in verse 18 he says, for the wrath of God is revealed against all ungodliness. And then he starts talking about all the people who think that they can do good. He says, you're under sin. All the religious people, you're under sin. You get down to Romans chapter 3, verse 9, he says, we have before proved both Jews and Gentiles are all under sin. And you stop and you think, well, that's not a good place to be. And you get down to verse 21. Notice in Romans chapter 3, verse 21, he says, but the righteousness of God without the law is manifested, being witnessed by the law and the prophets. Even the righteousness of God, which is by faith of Jesus Christ unto all. All right? That is now available to all, because all are under sin. So everybody has access to the righteousness of Jesus Christ. But notice, it's only upon all them that believe. The only people that have it. And notice it says, and upon all them. That means that the moment that you trust in the CrossWork of Christ, that He gave His life for you at Calvary, He was buried and rose again the third day, and we find out at the end of chapter 4, He was raised for our justification so that we can have His righteousness, so that we can be declared righteous with Him. He rose the third day, and you trust in what He did on the cross for you, that His blood paid for your sins. Then what happens is it's upon all them that believe. So that's something that you get automatically. You know, the best thing about the dispensation of grace is you don't have to seek and hunger after righteousness. All you have to do is trust Jesus Christ, and He gives you His righteousness right now today as a present possession. You don't have to wait on it to be filled one day. You can be filled right now the moment that you trust in the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. And that's an amazing truth that is lost on the majority of the churches out there. Why? Because they want to say, well, you got to hunger and thirst after righteousness to get it. No, you don't have to, because Christ has given you His righteousness. Right there's the verse. It says it's unto all and upon all them that believe. Why? For there is no difference. Why is there no difference, Paul? Verse 23, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And verse 24, here's the best part. He says, being justified freely by His grace through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus. By the way, you're justified freely. You are declared righteous freely, just by believing in the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. It's not something that we have to today hunger and thirst after. The problem is so many people, we don't know that we have that as a present personal possession because we're not told that we do. And the other issue along with that is we don't go and study it out for ourselves to find out that we do have that as a personal, private possession. And so then if you go, if you go to a church today and they say, well, you've got to hunger and seek after righteousness, all you got to say is, brother, I've already looked at the cross and it's already there. I don't have to look any farther than the cross. I don't have to do that. I've got it already. And so then as we look at this, as you look at this righteousness that he's talking about in Matthew chapter 5, it's the lifestyle of the kingdom. And by the way, what's really interesting is, when you look at righteousness, that's what Romans chapter 12 is all about. It's living God's word in and through you based upon an intelligent understanding of God's word written to you. And so then you can perform those things. Notice, go back to Jeremiah real quick. Jeremiah chapter 23. Jeremiah chapter 23. Verse 1. Jeremiah 23, verse 1. Woe be unto the pastors that destroy and scatter the sheep of my pasture, saith the Lord. If I was still in the Baptist church, I would preach that verse every Sunday morning. Because you go in a Baptist church, what do they do? Win them, wet them, whip them, and work them. And you got to whip them. That right there, that verse would do it. But notice verse 2. Therefore, thus saith the Lord God of Israel, against the pastors that feed my people, ye have scattered my flock, and driven them away, and have not visited them. Behold, I will visit upon you the evil of your doing, saith the Lord. And I will gather the remnant of my flock out of all countries whither I have driven them, and will bring them again to their folds, and they shall be fruitful and increase. Verse 4, and I will set up shepherds, those shepherds there are the 12 apostles, over them which shall feed them, and they shall fear no more, nor be dismayed, neither shall they be lacking, saith the Lord. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will raise unto David a righteous branch. Notice that's a capital B. Go back to Isaiah, or over to Isaiah 42, and you read a little bit more about that. Who's that branch? Well, that's Jesus Christ. Notice, he says, and a king shall reign and prosper, and shall execute judgment and justice in the earth. Notice, in his days Judah shall be saved, and Israel shall dwell safely, and this is his name, whereby he shall be called, notice, the Lord our righteousness. Now I want you to think about that real quick. Who is that he's talking about? He's talking about Jesus Christ. Who is it that they need to hunger and thirst after? The one whom they put up on a cross and pierced his side. Notice, that's you can see here that desperation for the lifestyle. They're desperate for it. Go real quick to Isaiah 26. Isaiah 26. Go back to that. Again, notice verse 8 and 9. We've already looked at this, but I want to bring this up again real quick. Verse 8 and 9. Yea, in the way of thy judgments, O Lord, have we waited for thee. The desire of our soul is to thy name and to the remembrance of thee. With my soul have I desired thee in the night. Yea, with my spirit within me will I seek thee early. For when thy judgments are in the earth, the inhabitants of the world will learn righteousness. Now, I bring these up again because I want to point out a couple things. Notice in verse 8, what is it that they are desirous of? It says, the desire of our soul is to thy name and to the remembrance of thee. That's two things. Notice, with my soul have I desired thee in the night. So that's three. They desired thee. Yea, with my spirit within me will I seek thee early. So there's the three things. What? Thee, thy name, and the remembrance of thee. Those are the three things. You know what? You know what the big issue here is? And I want to point this out real quick because I think we've all learned that this year. The fewer things that you want or you desire in life, the better it is. And you take a look at 2020. COVID has taught us that. You look at the life that we had back in January, February. I mean, I was watching a video from last year how we were talking about looking forward to going to the Bible conference in Chicago in April. It didn't happen. We were talking about going to the conference in June or July. It didn't happen. We were talking about our conference in June. It didn't happen. Now you take a look at the life that we have around us, and what's happened is, and I heard this, and I can't remember who I heard it from, but I think it came from Brother Jordan. You've got a lot of people who are cramming for finals right now because you've got older folks that are worried about death now more than they were last year. So what is their desire? Do they want to go and climb Mount Everest and do all this other stuff? No, they want to live. They want to see their grandbabies. And so what we see is the fewer things that we want in life, or the fewer things that we desire in life, the better it is. And like I said, COVID's taught us that this year. You know, one of those things hopefully that we've seen come out of this year is not well, I miss what my old life was. I mean, you look back, man, you know, I used to be able to do whatever I want, go wherever I want. By the way, you still can. You're just taking a risk. You know, some folks, especially if you've got pre-existing conditions and all that stuff, you're taking a risk on certain things. But it's still one of those things, you can still go do things. But do you know what it's done? I mean, for my wife and I, I've noticed this ourselves. You know, we sat around a little bit more than we did before, and we've been together a little bit more than we had before. And one of the things that we've noticed is there's been a little bit more Bible in our lives over the past few months. And you know, I wouldn't look back and say, let's trade that for anything. If this has taught us anything, is to quit looking for something new to do and just deal with what you have at home. Enjoy what you have at home. Now, that's a different thing, but that's the issue that I see here, and that's what they're doing. They're desiring certain things, and it's the righteousness that they're hungering and thirsting after here is the issue. And so one of the things that this has kind of taught me this year in looking through this, and this is a good little parallel, is set your affections on things above. And you'll forget about these things on the earth. Does it take time? Yeah, absolutely. And some of those things you might not forget, but you'll have a different perspective on it. Now, that's a completely different issue, but that's a parallel that we can take from that. Desire God's Word. Seek God's Word. Because in there you find that you already have righteousness. And by the way, when you go and you read 2 Timothy chapter 2, and he says, study to show thyself approved unto God. The fact that we are accepted in the beloved. That's a great position to have. It's a great thing to know. But it's an even greater thing to know how to use it. And the way you use that position is by faith, just believing what the words say. So when we go back to Matthew chapter 5, verse 6, he says, what? To those that are around him at that time that are fixing to go through, I guess I should say, since we're from Kentucky, fixing to go through, right? That they're fixing to go through that tribulation period, what's he say to them? Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness. Why? For they shall be filled. And that's a great place. That's a great place to be. Is to know that that will come to pass. Now, like I said, we've already got that righteousness because we've trusted in Christ. And if you've never done that, do that today. We've presented the gospel here today. If you need to know some more information, let us know. And we'll get that taken care of for you. All right, so that gets us through verse 6. Next Wednesday, we won't be here next Wednesday. And then the following Wednesday, we're going to be on a plane coming back. So we will see you all. I guess that would put us the first Wednesday of January, the 6th, I think. Because I think the 4th is Monday, 5th, and then 6th. We'll be back January 6th, and we'll continue on with the book of Matthew. So hopefully you're reading through Matthew chapter 5 as we go through this, and we'll continue this study in a couple weeks. So hope to see you all back then. Father, we thank you for the opportunity that we have to study your word. We're grateful for the truths that we find in there. And we know that even though Matthew chapter 5 is not written to or about us, we know that it is there for our learning, that we through patience and comfort of the Scriptures might have hope, that when we take a look at this promise that you made to the nation of Israel, specifically the little flock, that you will perform that. We can take solace in the fact that we know that what you've promised us will also come to pass. And that we might live our lives, that it might be to the praise and honor and glory of your grace, and it's in Christ's name we pray. Amen.